Okay, class. Now, normally I hate to miss time, and I also really don't like making videos, but at the same time I am going to have to miss time, and I'm going to have to make a video. So here we are. Now, this may actually be a good thing because we're going to be talking about photosynthesis, and also the history of. It's a rather dense topic, so you may want to watch this video more than once, which is probably more of a penalty than a prize, but as I said, here we are. So, excuse me, the first thing we need to talk about is exactly how photosynthesis came to be in the first place. So, if we talk about it, the first life forms on Earth, if we follow the classic evolutionary theory, the first life forms on Earth had to have been photosynthetic. And we know that because we think that early Earth, which was when the Earth was first made, did not have free atmospheric oxygen, which, as you probably are gathering by now, we need free atmospheric oxygen for life forms to exist on Earth that are not plants. So that kind of leads us to the logical assumption that the first organisms had to have been small, such as bacteria, and also they had to have been able to create oxygen through some kind of photosynthetic pathway. We don't have plants and algae, we don't have oxygen. So something had to have preceded them. So first let's talk about the purpose of energy. Why do life forms need to go through the process of photosynthesis? Well, if we look back here, you'll see that we need some sort of energy source to power a process called cellular respiration. Cellular respiration uses that ATP molecule that I was talking so much about last class. Without ATP, we can't power any kind of process. So the goal is we need to go through this process called cellular respiration, and that's going to help us to make ATP. Now, the source of the energy differs between the two types of life forms. Now, we are called heterotrophs. This means that we obtain our energy from food, meaning whatever you have for breakfast, lunch, dinner, that's going to be used as energy to power cellular respiration. But autotrophs are a bit different. They actually use sunlight in order to create or to obtain their energy. Now, with that sunlight, they're able to synthesize to make their own energy source in the form of sugars in order to power cellular respiration. Now they have another source for those sugars too. That's actually to make fruits, which we'll talk about more when we get to ecology. But we need to talk about first exactly how photosynthetic life forms came to be. And the first is, let's go back here to the endosymbiotic theory. So what this stated very, very simply, as we talked about, is that at one point you had a bacteria or a, sorry, we either had a bacteria-like life form that was eaten by a bigger cell, and those became eventually modern eukaryotic cells. Now with photosynthesis, what we think would happen is that there were two types of early bacteria. One was capable of making energy through cellular respiration. The other was capable of absorbing sunlight in order to make energy. Now, what we do think, just going back here a step, is that this green bacteria, the one that's capable of undergoing photosynthesis, this green bacteria was able to make its own energy, but could not create oxygen, meaning that it could create its own energy from some sort of early photosynthesis, but could not create its own oxygen. Now, on the other hand, this thing here was able to make its own energy, but also without oxygen. Now, something happens. We believe that this big cell first ate this smaller, what was going to become the mitochondria, and they formed some sort of a relationship where the mitochondria-like thing made energy for the bigger cell, and thus they began to work together. We think later on, a variant of the cell also did the same thing to this chloroplast-like cell, and then somehow with evolution is that this green bacteria was able to create oxygen. We think that that's basically what happened, but reading through the online sources, there really is not a clear consensus on exactly how photosynthetic life forms started to create oxygen. We just know that something happened and they were able to. Okay, so let's talk about what we do know, and there is a lot of strong evidence for this. It's called the Great Oxygen Catastrophe, or Great Oxygen Event. And what happened here is that, as I said, something happened, and a lot of oxygen started to be produced in the atmosphere. So we think about 3.5 billion years ago, we think that a lot of oxygen began to be produced in the environment. What we think happened is that all of a sudden, a pool of cyanobacteria, which were or are still the type of bacteria that can undergo photosynthesis and create oxygen as a byproduct, we think they started to pool in large amounts at the bottom of the ocean floor. We think then that they were able to start to create oxygen, and it slowly bubbled to the surface of the ocean, then entered the atmosphere. And this happens in large amounts all of a sudden. So this answers a lot of questions about when organisms started to become photosynthetic, but as I said, we're not sure exactly how that happened. We only have evidence of. Now, there is evidence to support this. The first is that we found a lot of bacteria in fossils around 3.5 billion years ago, about the time when we believe that that oxygen began to be produced on Earth. Also, when we have found these bacteria in fossils, we've also found the presence of calcium carbonate, which can only be formed in the presence of oxygen. So those are two pieces of evidence that give a lot of credence that oxygen was created in large amounts 3.5 billion years ago, and the end result is that we were able to have atmospheric oxygen. So finding lots of fossilized bacteria 3.5 billion years ago, as well as evidence of calcium carbonate, are two pieces of evidence that give a lot of support to the fact that we had a great oxidation event caused by bacteria. And that is the end of part 1 of this video.